Let's put the finishing touches on our model by using sculpt geometry to soften up some of these transition areas here where it's seeming a bit machine-like because of the soft selection tool we used. It was a great first pass at making a sculpt on this, but we want to switch to a brush-based tool at this point because that'll give us more control. Maya has a brush-based interface called Artisan that's implemented throughout the program. In this case, we'll see it implemented in the Sculpt Geometry tool. Select one of the cushions and go into the Mesh Tools menu and choose Sculpt Geometry Tool Options. Get the tool settings open. And if you need to get those open again, as long as the Sculpt Geometry tool is here, you can double-click and get back to this window. You'll see we have Operation, Push, Pull, and so on. Let's try Pull. And then hover the mouse over the object and you'll see a little circle. We need to make the brush radius larger. We can adjust that radius numerically here, or we can use the keyboard shortcut, which is B. We need to make sure that the main window has focus first. So right-click on the main window just briefly to give focus. Then hold down the B key, and the cursor will change to 2 side-to-side arrows. And now click and drag the left mouse button left to right to make the brush larger or smaller. We're adjusting the brush radius. You'll see we also have different brush types. There's a soft brush type and a hard edge. Maybe we'll try the soft edge one. And we've got pull as our operation. We can click and drag and we'll see we're pulling polygon faces outward. If we don't click off the object, we can always erase this. There's an erase tool. Drag that over and I've erased that operation. Cool, so we got the pull operation. And we also have smoothing. And you can do that by choosing the smooth operation here, or just by holding down the Shift key at any time. Hold down Shift. So give focus to the main window once again, if you need to, and hold down Shift. And you'll see it says SM, which stands for smooth. And I can drag across there and I'm smoothing things. Undo that. If we go back to the smooth tool proper, we can change the smooth strength and see what that does. And with that tool selected, I don't need to hold down Shift. I can just do it. Undo that. You'll also see max displacement. And that's the amount of deviation or how far a polygon is allowed to move. And it's currently set to 1 centimeter. I can go back to the pull tool and increase that up a bit. And now I can pull up farther. Undo that with Z. We can adjust the max displacement with the M keyboard shortcut. Hold down M and drag and you'll see an arrow go out. And that's the displacement amount. If I have a long arrow like that, I will see a great deal of displacement. Z to undo that. Okay, so those are how all the Sculpt Geometry tool options pretty much work. I want a low max displacement like I had, about 1. Pull those up a little bit, and then maybe smooth. Hold down Shift and just do a little bit. Undo a few times. Maybe I want a lower smooth amount. Take it back down to maybe 1 or 2. Have a subtler effect. There we go. Back to the pull tool, just pulling things up a little bit and then holding down Shift and then smoothing it. Just to randomize things a bit so it's not so predictable and boxy. We don't want to do too much, as you can see. So if you get in trouble, you can always go back to the erase tool. Erase those changes. But if you choose another tool, you will lose the ability to erase. If I go to the Select tool, as soon as I click on that, now the sculpt operations have all been baked. I can go back to the Sculpt Geometry tool, but with the Erase tool, I can't erase those changes now. A couple other little things. If you look down here, you will see Stroke. Open that up and you'll have the ability to reflect on an axis. The x-axis is by default. That means that we will sculpt the same way on both sides here. Grab the pull tool. Okay, so that's reflection. And finally, there's a helpful option down here under Display, which is Draw Brush while painting. That way the circle doesn't disappear while you're painting. That's kind of helpful. You also have the option to turn wireframes off while you're sculpting. Undo that. To make it easier to select different objects while you're using sculpt geometry, use the keyboard shortcuts. Q to select, and then Y is the most recent tool. And I'll get the sculpt geometry tool back again. Maybe have a lower max displacement. It's totally up to you. You're just kind of trying to find an aesthetic result here. We're just about finished. We've sculpted the model a little bit. Let's make sure all the surface normals are clean. Select those back cushions. Go to normals and soften the edges. And if there were any problems with our seams, those are now solved. Let's look at it in texture mode with the 6 key. And we're ready to finally output this. We'll save it now. File, increment, and save. And that is a version that has history. We can also save a version that has no history. Let's delete all history. Edit, delete all by type history. And that includes our flare deformer down here. That got erased as well. That was on foot number 1. Now this version has no history, so we want to save out another file. File, increment, and save. And finally, we want to save a version that we could actually bring into a master scene, like a house. And for that, we want a super mover, or a handy object that we can use to move things around with. I could put all the parts into a group, but the group is only really selectable from the outliner. There's no viewport indicator of a group. I like to create a super mover, or a NURBS curve or other object that's the parent of all of these objects, which makes it easy for me to move them all as a unit. And we also don't want the image planes, so we can toggle their visibility by clicking the V button here. And I've turned the grid off previously in this viewport. Let's turn it back on again. Show grid. Let's go into the top view, tap the space bar, and dolly back. Make sure that we can see the grid clearly. Maybe switch the background color, Alt B. And I'll create a CV curve that's in a rectangular shape. Create CV curve tool, options, and I want straight lines. Under curve degree, choose 1 linear. And now we want to snap to the grid. Hold down the X key and click to create control vertices on the NURBS curve. You don't need to close the curve. Just draw 3 sides and then press the Enter key. And with that curve still selected, go into the Surfaces menu and choose Edit Curves, Open Close Curves. That's just a cleaner way of closing the curve up. Cool. We'll give it a name. Call it Sofa Mover. Press Enter. With our curve created, we can reset the positions and orientation of all the objects so that we can easily put them back where they are. And that's called freezing the transforms. Grab the Select tool and select everything except for the Super Mover object. And go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. You can check the options. And we just want to make sure that Freeze, Translate, Rotate, and Scale are all enabled. And click Freeze Transform. And now all the objects have 0 transforms for Translate and Rotate, and a scale of 1. That way, if we get these moved away, we can always put them back easily. So for example, I can even select everything and rotate in some crazy direction and completely destroy my model and maybe move everything away and do crazy things. But I can just select them all and then set all their translate and rotate values to 0, and everything goes back where it should be. After freezing transforms, we can create a hierarchy. Link all the objects to the super mover. That can be done in many ways. One way is from the outliner. Window, outliner. And if we middle mouse drag an object in the outliner, we can either change its position in the list, or we can parent to another object. If we want to move something to a different position in the list, just select it and then middle mouse, drag until you see a straight line, and the object will be moved to that position in the list. Middle mouse click and drag on top of something, such as the super mover, and you'll see a box surrounding that object's name. release the middle mouse button, and the selected object got linked now to the object we dragged onto. I can open that, and you can see back cushion 3 is a child of sofa mover. I'll just do that for everything except for the image planes. All the cushions, the feet, and the frame, middle mouse click and drag on top of sofa mover. And now sofa mover is the parent of all those objects. And if I select it and grab the move tool, I can move or rotate or scale. Excellent. So I'll restore that back to 0. And we can now save our scene file once again, and then only export the super mover and the mesh objects. We don't want to export our image planes, even though they're hidden. If we tried to merge this scene into another Maya scene, the image planes would come in. So I want to make sure that doesn't happen. Turn those on so we can see that they exist. I'm going to select that super mover and only export it and its hierarchy. File, export selection, and save it as a Maya ASCII. And this is now a final asset. I'll call it sofa asset 10. That means I can bring it into another scene file. That's just my convention for indicating that it's not a working file, it's a final output file. Click Export Selection. And now let's open the exported scene file. We've already saved this one. Go into File, Open Scene, and open Sofa Asset. And we don't need to save our changes because we just saved a moment ago. And this version does not have the image planes, nor does it have the display layer. That's our lesson for building a multi-part model. If you want to learn more, once again, keep checking back at Digital Arts Guild and or get a subscription to lynda.com. Thank you very much.